30 feet underground, beneath the smoking ruins of Berlin, the most hated man in the world is trapped like a rat. The walls around Adolf Hitler are shaking. Soviet artillery shells are pounding the city above, and with each explosion, chunks of concrete dust drift down from the ceiling of his bunker. This is mid-April 1945. The man who once commanded millions now rules over a concrete tomb. The Führerbunker isn't some grand palace, it's a cramped, suffocating maze of narrow hallways and tiny rooms. Hitler's entire world has shrunk down to this underground fortress beneath the Reich Chancellery, and it's basically a concrete prison. The bunker complex was hastily expanded back in 1944 when things started going badly. Now it's become this surreal underground world where the last Nazi true believers are scurrying around like rats in a maze. You've got narrow corridors echoing with footsteps, ventilation systems humming constantly, trying to push fresh air through this tomb. But the air down there? It's thick with cigarette smoke and fear. Hitler's personal quarters are pathetic when you think about what this guy used to have. We're talking about a small sitting room, an even smaller bedroom, and a bathroom. That's it. This is the same man who used to live in massive palaces, and now he's got less space than most college dorm rooms. By April 20th, Hitler's 56th birthday, the Red Army had pushed to within 10 miles of the bunker. Think about that for a second. 10 miles. That's like a 15-minute drive on a normal day. The traditional birthday celebration was absolutely pathetic. High-ranking Nazis like Heinrich Himmler and Hermann Göring show up to pay their respects, but you can see it in their eyes. They know this is probably the last time they'll ever see the Führer alive. And Hitler? He looks terrible. His left hand is shaking uncontrollably, and it's gotten way worse in recent months. Those once piercing blue eyes that could terrify entire rooms? They've gone dull and unfocused. He's hunched over like an old man, making him look way older than his 56 years. The military situation reports that come in every day are painting this increasingly desperate picture. General Helmuth Weidling, he's the guy in charge of defending Berlin, keeps having to deliver updates that get worse and worse. Soviet forces under Marshal Georgy Zhukov and Marshal Ivan Konev have completely surrounded the city. Every single escape route has been cut off. The Wehrmacht's final reserves, they're down to old men and teenage boys from the Volkssturm, trying to fight battle-hardened Red Army troops who've been fighting their way from Stalingrad to Berlin. Here's what Hitler's daily routine looks like now, and it's absolutely insane. He sleeps until late in the day, often not coming out of his private rooms until early afternoon. His cook, Constanze Manziarle, prepares his meals, mostly vegetarian stuff that he barely touches. Picture this. The man who used to command the attention of massive rallies now spends hours hunched over military maps, moving around little pieces representing army divisions that don't even exist anymore. He's playing war games while the real war is happening right above his head. Then, there's Eva Braun. She arrives at the bunker on April 15th, and Hitler actually tries to send her away. He doesn't want her there. But Eva looks him in the eye and basically says, "I'm staying with you no matter what." She's chosen to share Hitler's fate, whatever that's going to be. And honestly, her loyalty touches even the hardened SS guards who are protecting the bunker. Eva brings this weird sense of normalcy to the underground madness. She's playing with Blondie, Hitler's beloved German shepherd. She's trying to stay cheerful when everyone else is drowning in despair. While the world is ending around them, she's doing her hair, putting on makeup, acting like they're on some kind of bizarre vacation instead of waiting to die. April 22nd, this is when everything really falls apart for Hitler. He's been counting on SS Obergruppenführer Felix Steiner to launch this massive counterattack that's supposed to relieve Berlin. The report comes in. "Sir, we don't have enough forces. The attack isn't happening." Hitler completely loses it. We're talking about a rage that makes his legendary temper tantrums look like mild irritation. He's screaming that everyone has betrayed him, the generals, the party, the German people themselves, everyone. And right there, in that moment of complete psychological breakdown, Hitler first seriously starts talking about suicide. He declares that he's going to stay in Berlin and die with the city rather than run away to the Alpine Redoubt in Bavaria, like everyone keeps telling him to do. But here's the thing about Hitler even facing his own death. the guy can't stop being a complete narcissist. He's not talking about suicide as an escape. He's describing it in these grandiose terms, like it's going to be this heroic last stand that will inspire future generations. The man is completely delusional about his own importance right up to the end. The atmosphere in the bunker keeps getting more and more surreal as the end approaches. Joseph Goebbels, the master propagandist himself, has moved his entire family into the bunker complex. And we're talking about his 6 young children here. His wife Magda has already made this horrific decision. The children are not going to survive to see Germany's defeat. She'd rather murder her own kids than let them live in a world without National Socialism. Think about how fanatical you have to be to make that choice. April 23rd brings the ultimate betrayal. Hitler gets word that Heinrich Himmler, the guy he called Der Treue Heinrich, faithful Heinrich, has been secretly negotiating with the Allies through Count Foch Bernadotte. This absolutely destroys Hitler. The man he trusted above everyone else, the guy who ran the SS, has committed what Hitler sees as the ultimate act of treachery. Hitler's paranoia, which was already at fever pitch, now completely consumes him. If Himmler can betray him, then literally anyone can. He can't trust a single person around him. Meanwhile, the Soviet noose keeps getting tighter and tighter. Artillery shells are landing so frequently now that the bunker's electrical system keeps flickering on and off. You can hear machine gun fire clearly through the concrete walls, which means street fighting has reached the government district. General Weidling keeps coming down with reports that ammunition is running critically low, and that his defenders are being pushed back block by block. Hitler's physical condition is deteriorating rapidly during these final days. The trembling left hand, the stooped walk, the difficulty maintaining focus during conversations, it's all getting worse. Dr. Werner Hasse, who's taken over medical duties after Dr. Theodor Morell left, can't do much beyond providing painkillers and vitamins. The stress of absolute defeat is destroying a body that was already weakened by years of questionable medical treatments and psychological pressure. April 28th, Hitler learns that Benito Mussolini is dead. Italian partisans caught him and executed him, then displayed his body publicly in Milan. This news fills Hitler with absolute horror. He becomes completely obsessed with making sure his own corpse won't be subjected to the same kind of public humiliation. This fear is going to drive many of his actions in his final hours. That same day, in what has to be one of the most bizarre ceremonies in human history, Hitler marries Eva Braun. Picture this scene. The world is ending. Soviet soldiers are literally blocks away fighting in the streets, and Hitler's having a wedding ceremony in a concrete bunker 50 feet underground. The civil ceremony is performed by this minor official, Walter Wagner, who they hastily summon to the bunker. Eva signs the marriage certificate as Eva B., then crosses it out and corrects it to Eva Hitler, née Braun. After waiting 12 years to become Mrs. Hitler, she finally gets her wish with maybe 40 hours left to live. The wedding reception is absolutely macabre. They're drinking champagne and eating cake, while Soviet shells are falling overhead, and you can hear the sounds of battle getting closer and closer. Right after the wedding ceremony, Hitler dictates his final political testament to his secretary, Traudl Junge. And even now, facing death, this document is just a rambling mixture of self-justification and blame-shifting that shows how completely delusional he still is. He's blaming the Jews for starting the war. He's claiming he never wanted conflict. He's appointing Admiral Karl Dönitz as his successor. Most telling of all, he shows absolutely no remorse for the Holocaust or the suffering his regime inflicted on millions of people. Even with death staring him in the face, Hitler remains convinced of his own righteousness and the justice of his cause. April 29th brings news that confirms Hitler's worst fears about what happens if he's captured alive. Reports are reaching the bunker about how the Red Army is treating captured German officials. Many are being subjected to show trials and public humiliation before execution. For a man whose entire identity was built around the image of the all-powerful Führer, the prospect of being paraded before his enemies as a defeated prisoner is absolutely unbearable. The final preparations begin on April 29th. Hitler decides to test the cyanide capsules that Dr. Hasse provided, and he tests them on Blondie, his beloved German shepherd. Watching that dog die affects Hitler more visibly than news of German military casualties had in years. The man who remained completely unmoved by reports of mass death actually weeps over his pet. It's this final glimpse of whatever humanity was left in him. As night falls on April 29th, the sounds of battle have grown so close that you can pick out individual rifle shots from the constant background noise of artillery. Soviet forces are now fighting in the streets, immediately surrounding the government quarter. General Weidling comes down and estimates that organized resistance can continue for maybe 24 to 48 hours before being completely overwhelmed. Hitler spends his final night awake, just wandering the bunker's corridors and speaking quietly with the staff members who've remained loyal to the end. His bodyguard, Rokas Misch, later said that Hitler seemed oddly calm, like he'd finally found peace with his decision. The man who'd lived his entire adult life in this state of manic energy seemed, for once, actually at rest. The morning of April 30th, 1945, dawns gray and overcast above the ruins of Berlin, though no natural light penetrates down to the depths of the Führerbunker. Hitler gets up late, as has become his habit, and eats what will be his final breakfast. He spends the morning doing routine stuff, reviewing overnight reports from the shrinking perimeter of German resistance, discussing meaningless administrative matters with his aide Julius Schaub, making small talk with the bunker's inhabitants. Around noon, Hitler receives General Weidling's final report on the military situation. Soviet forces have advanced to within blocks of the Reich Chancellery. Ammunition is almost completely gone, and organized resistance will collapse within hours. There's not going to be any miraculous reversal, no last-minute salvation. The 1,000-year Reich has been reduced to a few city blocks, and even those are slipping away. Hitler and Eva go into his private study shortly after 3:30 in the afternoon. The staff has been given strict instructions: do not disturb them under any circumstances. What passed between husband and wife in those final moments? Nobody knows. No witnesses survived to tell us what their last conversation was about. What we do know is that Eva Braun Hitler, who chose love over life, bit down on a cyanide capsule at approximately 3:45. Hitler, unwilling to trust poison alone, bit his capsule and simultaneously shot himself through the right temple with his personal Walther pistol. The sound of that gunshot brought Hitler's valet Heinz Ling and bodyguard Rokas Misch to the study door. They waited several minutes before entering. Can you imagine that moment? Finally working up the courage to open that door, they found the newly married couple seated together on Hitler's blue sofa. Eva had slumped to her left, and you could smell the bitter almond scent of cyanide in the room. Hitler sat upright with a small hole in his right temple and blood trickling down his cheek onto his gray jacket. Following Hitler's explicit instructions, his body and Eva's were carried upstairs to the Chancellery garden. They poured gasoline over both corpses and set them ablaze while Soviet artillery continued to pound the surrounding area. The makeshift funeral pyre burned for several hours, while the last defenders of Berlin continued their hopeless battle just streets away. Joseph Goebbels, now the nominal leader of what remained of Nazi Germany, tried to negotiate with the Soviets but got rebuffed. On May 1st, following Hitler's example, Goebbels and his wife murdered their 6 children with cyanide before taking their own lives. The architect of Nazi propaganda had scripted his own final act, choosing death over defeat, just like his beloved Führer. Hitler died exactly as he had lived, concerned primarily with his own legend and legacy. His final act wasn't heroism or sacrifice for his people. It was the ultimate expression of his narcissism. Unable to face the reality of defeat and unwilling to account for his crimes, Adolf Hitler chose the coward's way out, leaving everyone else to deal with the consequences of his actions. The bunker fell to Soviet forces on May 2, 1945. The soldiers who descended into Hitler's final refuge found only empty rooms, abandoned personal effects, and the lingering smell of death. The man who had terrorized Europe for 12 years had vanished into smoke and ash, leaving behind only the smoldering ruins of a continent and the memories of his victims. The Third Reich, which Hitler had boasted would last a millennium, had endured for exactly 12 years and 3 months. In the end, it died with its creator not in glory, but in ignominy and defeat. The Thousand-Year Reich? It lasted 12 years and 3 months. And it all ended in a concrete tomb 30 feet underground with the sound of a single gunshot that nobody will ever forget.